Well, hey, everybody. My name is Scott.
And
this
I'm
is
Nathan.
Welcome
we'll get intro for sure.
Yes. Welcome to our ongoing video series that we are doing. We are looking at talking through various books that we think you might find helpful. We sure find these books helpful. And we most recently have been working through Brené Brown's book called Dare to Lead. And today we are looking specifically at section 3. And she starts out in section 3 by saying, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings, or squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage ineffective and unproductive behavior. And her main point in this section is she compares what she calls armored leadership, basically when we wear a mask, or maybe you might think of it as a face mask, more of an emotional mask to protect who we really are, versus what she calls daring leadership. And in fact, what I think from a recovery point of view is interesting that in her third point, which we'll hit on in just a bit, she talks about how armored leadership can be, she calls it numbing, a numbing kind of leadership. And daring leadership, she says, is setting boundaries and finding real comfort. But in there, she gets into her experience, her year-long experience with AA. And she talks about how much she learned through AA. She says, I ultimately worked the AA program for a year. And let me just tell you, all the slogans are true, which I love that, because from time to time, we talk about this in Celebrate Recovery, the various slogans that are there. And I find these slogans very helpful. And clearly she does as well.
I do
slogans.
love he says, leave it to a bunch of drunks to find the secrets of life.
Yes, and that's a quote straight from the book. Among them, she goes on to say, wherever you go, there you are. One we say in Celebrate Recovery, you're only as sick as your secrets. One day at a time, live and let live. Halt is really important. Don't let yourself get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And then one certainly that we embrace, let go and let God. Certainly that's easy to say. There's a lot behind that, but very powerful. So I share that up front just to say, Brené is coming from a recovery background, as she talks about, well, throughout all of her writings, of course, but in this section on armored leadership and daring leadership. And Nathan, I'm going to ask you in a moment, which of these stood out to you? She compares and contrasts the two lists. But I just wanted you to be aware of Brené's background. So which of these in this list, armored leadership and daring leadership, stood out to you?
Well, first I'm going to preface it because she references one of her first books, maybe it is her first, Gifts of Imperfection. And she talks really about wholeheartedness, her definition of what that means, which is engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. And she talks about integration, which is simply to make whole. And I think she's looking at this leadership from the perspective, like, we're not trying to compartmentalize ourselves. I mean, this is something that Kurt Thompson was saying. The disintegration has caused major problems for us in our mental health and in our emotional, well, I would say emotional health, even though some would say emotional intelligence. But, and I think that when she is comparing armored leadership to daring leadership, to me, it feels like the fake presumption, the armor, is really trying to reinforce the disintegration model, which is just not true. Like it's trying to, even the quote that you said in the beginning, which is, well, you can either face and attend to fears and feelings, or you're just going to spend a lot of time managing ineffective or unproductive behavior. Why? Because you weren't being truthful about what was really there. Meaning, it's really trying to lead from a false sense of a false reality, which is you're not bringing your stuff with you to work. I shouldn't have to do this, you know. So the first one, you know, I want to point out is, like you said, the numbing. On the other side of that she's saying find real comfort, set boundaries, but just the numbing aspect. How many people are showing up in not just their business lives, but even in their home lives with this sense of numbness, like that they've really squashed a lot of emotional levels because they've just been maybe too much to deal with. And maybe they feel like it's easier to get on with things, maybe, you know, which is just not true. There's a lot of lies that we tell ourselves, I think, with this whole numbing thing, like, oh, you know, being too emotional, making emotional decisions, just going to be the wrong ones. Yeah, just the continual. We've made a case for why we should only be like brains on a stick and not emotional, wholehearted beings that are dealing with shame and worthiness issues.
Yes.
So that was number 3 on her list, but it's definitely one that stands out.
Yeah. Another one that stands out is number 9, which is hustling for our worth. That would be armored leadership. Versus daring leadership would be knowing our value. And when I see that, I'm reminded of something. Well, actually, I'm reminded of something that Jesus said. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now, that's quoted oftentimes in our culture.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a mocking way. Sometimes people are trying to use it in a trite way or even a humorous way. But I find for myself, for example, when I'm feeling down, I can use armored leadership and try and protect that I'm feeling down, but I really can't. And so I may come across as just having a flat affect. Like I may think I'm hiding things, but the reality is people are like, something's going on with him. What I've been trying to do in my work with Celebrate Recovery, because it comes up again and again, is replace the hiding with truth. So, for example, a psalm that's been very important to me recently, a psalm at PSALM, is Psalm 16:11. In your presence, there is fullness of joy. And I remind myself, you know, I may be feeling down right now, and it may be legitimate, but in God's presence, there is always fullness of joy. And I may be sad, but God's not.
Yeah.
I may be depressed, but God's not. And so I'm not trying to trick myself. I'm just trying to say, as a follower of Christ, what is true about me? I'm forgiven. I'm a child of the King. The Holy Spirit lives inside. I mean, all the things that we're taught that are true of us. And so that's where she uses the phrase knowing our value. That is daring leadership. And so that stands out to me. I want to lead as one who more and more becomes aware of my value by knowing what is true, primarily from what the scriptures say about me, or say about us.
Yeah. Honestly, you know, when she is listing these daring leadership things, it's totally, in my opinion, just the biblical measures of leadership that is comparing to this worldly sense of leadership. I mean, you can see in many of them, crush or be crushed. That's the victim or Viking mentality. versus practicing integration. The next one, you hide behind cynicism versus modeling clarity, kindness, and hope. Being a knower, meaning I know everything, versus being a learner. I'm kind of going through this, but I'm hoping that the point comes out that you can see they're very much kingdom. It's part of the heart and character that frankly she's proving with the work that she's been doing. I mean, even this one, power over versus power with, power to, or power within. And they're just fabulous comparisons that is pointing out this major difference between leadership that frankly does make a difference in business. When we're thinking that if you do leadership like this, you're going to have problems. You won't, you might think that you're going to make people get back to work, but you're going to have these emotional problems that are going to lead to unhealthy cultures, unhealthy changes.
Yep. And I like number 14 in this list. By the way, there's 16 that she has altogether here.
Yeah.
Number 14 is collecting gold stars. That would be armored leadership. And in other words, I'm constantly striving to have you pat me on the back, versus giving gold stars. I'm becoming aware of what others are doing around me and the effort they are making, and reflecting that back to them, and building them up, which again is a very biblical value, right? Encourage one another.
Right. Here's another one. Rewarding exhaustion as a status symbol, attaching productivity to self-worth. I know that even in churches that happens. We like to say, oh man, we did this much work, I'm feeling so exhausted, and we pat ourselves on the back. And on the other side, she's saying, well, we're modeling and supporting rest, play, and recovery, making sure that, okay, maybe at times there's work that happens like that, but that shouldn't actually be a cultural norm, for sure.
Yes. Yep. So, that reminds me, I won't say who it was. Some people would know, some wouldn't, but I was talking to somebody. I knew they were having a busy week leading up to Easter, and I asked them how their week was going, assuming they would say, oh, it's been way, way too much. I got to get through this week. Instead, they pleasantly surprised me by saying, actually, I'm very aware of that principle that you're referring to, and I actually try and overestimate the amount of time it will take me to complete a particular task, basically saying, so I have margin in my life. And I just thought, wow, that is such a healthy response. And this is, in our culture, you might hear a quote like that, or somebody say something like that and think, what, are they not working hard? And that's not the case at all. But isn't that wise to overestimate? Because how often do we normally underestimate and try and schedule too many things? And I just thought that was excellent.
Yeah.
So this is a great section. Like I said, you can read about her 16 characteristics of armored leadership, and then the 16 opposing that would define daring leadership. And we hope, as we work our way through this, that you'll pick up these books and read them for yourselves.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, it's just showing, whether it's talking about shame or talking about leadership, there are these ways that we need to kind of authenticate as the real and healthy versions, and stop feeling guilty when we're taking adequate rest, or when we're playing, or when we are when we're naming fears and appropriately dealing with them. And it's so it's just an amazing time of research that's happening, I think.
It really is. And to see the overlap in many cases with the scriptures is so striking to me. In fact, the next section that we'll look at, which is section 4, is on something we've talked about a lot
Many
so
times.
far, and that's shame and empathy.
Yeah. So
that is what we will get into on our next video together. We hope that you'll like these and share these. Any comments or thoughts that you might have, please feel free to send us an email or call us. We'd love to connect with you. If you don't have a recovery meeting, you can always join us on Monday nights at 7 o'clock in the chapel at Christ Community Church. All right, we'll let you go for now.
See you next time.
Take care.